And welcome back. While many Arizona teachers say their pay is so low they can't afford to be teachers, some government employees are cashing in under Governor Doug Ducey. Many of the governor's own staffers have seen hefty raises, and now we're learning that workers at another state agency most folks have never heard of are getting double-digit pay hikes. The Arizona Republic's Craig Harris has been taking a close look at the paychecks state employees collect from taxpayers. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So you reported last week on these hefty raises at the State Department of Administration. It's the personnel and purchasing agency for the state. They don't do a lot of exciting work over there, but it's important.
It's important.
They watch the money. Overall wages there have risen 16% under Doug Ducey.
Actually, more closer to 18% when you include promotions and wages.
18%?
Right around there, yes.
And so how does the director or the governor explain that?
Well, they point out that that agency has shrunk. They've laid off a good portion of their staff, and they point out that they've saved taxpayers money by cutting down on and being more efficient through procurement. So they've shrunk their staff, and they've taken that money and they've doled it out and given pretty sizable pay raises to the folks who stay. Okay, so as you pointed out in your story, the director, Craig Brown told legislators, you know what, our workers are way underpaid. State workers as a whole are way underpaid. I think they earn about 19 cents less on the dollar than workers in the private sector. Right.
Is that about right? So some might say, well, what's wrong with this? He's bringing folks up to private sector wages.
Well, that's true, and he is bringing his folks up to private sector wages, but you have to remember that their benefits at the Department of Administration far exceed anything in the private sector, especially when you count their health care or their insurance. And it is good or noble to bring those wages up, but the fact is that Mr. Brown has the power to tell lawmakers, well, let's do it for everybody else, and they haven't done that. So if you look at the Department of Child Safety, which is dealing with what the governor and other folks have called a child care crisis with foster care children, those folks got $1 a raise bump, a stipend.
A dollar a day?
$1 a day stipend, right.
So I asked the governor about that this past week, and he says, well, I give my agency heads discretion to do what they need to do on raises. Is that right?
That is right, and that's one thing that the governor has done is he's giving agency directors the power to, okay, if you can find money in your budget, you can give raises. The problem is when you're dealing with someone like child services, which have big caseloads, you can't just cut the staff and then give more money to somebody else. You're dealing with human capital. Small agencies like the Department of Administration or the governor's office, you can cut down and be more efficient and then reward people, but you can't do that when you're dealing with human capital, you're dealing with caseworkers, or you're dealing with teachers.
Exactly, and you've hit on it right there. These two groups, these are pink-collar ghettos, largely women. They're cost centers, right? Teachers can't find a way to cut $1,000 or $2,000 out of what they do.
Right. You can't find ways to be, there's always ways to be efficient, of course, but you can't become so efficient that you're going to give someone a 16% raise who's a teacher. The only way you do that is you have to allocate more money, and that's something that the governor has avoided doing. He doesn't want to raise taxes. That's been his mantra, and he, has been very careful about how they allocate dollars.
And bottom line, he is actually living up to a campaign pledge, right?
Absolutely.
He said he'd shrink government and... But here's my big question. Are there any metrics involved here, say at the Department of Administration, when they give out raises? Are there performance reviews? Are there charts where they compare, have comparable salaries? Or is it just some person saying, yeah, okay, we'll give you 10,000 more?
No, to be fair, Craig Brown, the director there, has imposed metrics, and they are trying to be more metric-oriented, or they're trying to set goals, and they're trying to find ways to be more efficient. And folks who make their goals get bonuses. And what we found is that some folks have gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bonuses over the last several years because they hit their goals, which is admirable, which does motivate staff and which keeps people wanting to come to work, and it motivates your workforce. The problem is, how do you transfer that over to child services? We're dealing with caseloads of children where you have wild cards of, if you're dealing with crappy parents and children who are being abused, how do you set a metric system that you're saving those kids who are in foster care? And that's where I think you have a trouble with an apples to oranges of how you're going to reward people who are doing the work out in the field, which you've said is a crisis, compared to people who are basically, well, pushing paper.
Desk jockeys.
And pushing paper to find ways to procure things better and to deal with personnel issues.
All right. Great question. We'll have to leave it with that. Greg Harris, thanks so much for joining us.
Great.